Good evening and welcome to the April 19th, 2016 meeting of the Milford Planning and Zoning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is executive session. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. May we have roll call from left to right, please?
Richard Lutz.
John Grant.
Edward Mead.
Scott Marlowe.
Tom Nickel.
Tom Panzella.
And I'm Anthony Sutton. And we are joined this evening by David Sulkus, City Planner, and Phyllis Leggett, Board Clerk. As previously mentioned, the first item on our agenda is executive session. Is there a motion to go into executive session? Mr. Panzella, is there a second? Seconded. All in favor? The motion passes. We are in executive session.
Mr. Chair?
If I can invite the city planner to join us. We are out of executive session, and we have returned to the regular meeting. The next item on the agenda is item D, CGS 8-24 approval. We have two items currently on the agenda, but it's been requested that we add an additional item under the 824 approval to the agenda. The city's open space coordinator, Steve Johnson, would like to speak to us and request approval of a grant involving, I believe it's is it easements, Mr. Sulkus, for certain parcels of property within the city. In order to add that to the agenda, that must be voted on and approved by 2/3 of the board, which this evening I believe would be 4? 4 out of 7?
Duh.
I was told there'd be no math. Is there a motion to add Mr. Johnson to the agenda under 8-24 approval? Mr. Panzella, second. Mr. Mead, all in favor? Aye. The motion passes. We'll take that up as the third and final item under 8-24 approval. Going back to the agenda, the first item is for the City of Milford to acquire 701 North Street. Mr. Sulkus, who is presenting that? Or if anyone.
I'm looking in the audience. I guess Mr. Johnson told me that he was going to speak on it. And Mr. Woods is here if you have any legal questions.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Johnson.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. My name's Steve Johnson. I'm the City of Milford's Open Space and Natural Resource Agent. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the city to acquire the 701 North Street property. I am asking for your board to do two things. First, to provide a favorable recommendation to the Board of Aldermen to acquire the 3 parcels that comprise 701 North Street. And second, to approve the use of $269,000 from the Open Space Fund account towards this acquisition. This 6.98 acre parcel shares a common border with the city's Orchards Golf Course. The Orchards is on land that was acquired over time as part of the city's largest open space tract of land called Eisenhower Park. This 7-acre parcel has a shared border measuring about 863 feet along the Orchards Golf Course property. The 3 lots have approximately 3.15 acres of orchards on the property. This parcel represents an opportunity to acquire land that is contiguous to other open space. This is the first priority of our 2012 Plan of Conservation and Development Action Plan. As city property, this would provide a chance to explore options for the highest and best use of these 7 acres. The community will benefit from this as city property while protecting this 7-acre site. In the past, the city has recognized the need to acquire land for municipal purposes, including but not limited to maintaining availability of property for purposes consistent with the City of Milford's Plan of Conservation and Development, its zoning regulations, goals for economic stability, and the preservation and protection of open space. Acquiring land that has an open space component has been vital for preserving Milford's sense of place while providing options for public use, recreation, passive open space enjoyment, and promoting conservation values. The benefits for our community are important for today and for future generations. There are many examples of this commitment throughout our city that have been supported by this board. The 6.6-acre Orange Avenue parcels acquired in 2006 are a great example. These parcels were acquired by the city and plans are being finalized now to create recreational fields. That decision gave the city the opportunity to explore the options and to create a nice public benefit. This parcel has been recognized as an important strategic acquisition by the Golf Course Commission and has been supported by the Mayor's Open Space Advisory Committee. I'm asking for the board's support to favorably recommend this acquisition to the Board of Aldermen and to approve the use of the open space funds for this to be realized. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there questions for Mr. Johnson relative to this item? Mr. Grant?
I have one question.
Yes.
The 701 property, has there been any thought as to what the buildings that are on that, will they be taken down, and or is there any plans for that property once it's acquired?
Not that I'm aware of yet. I know it's under discussion, but I haven't been involved with those discussions, so I don't have the information to share because I just don't know what that is. I think the goal for me being here tonight was to give some background, but clearly there are a lot of questions and that need to be answered in terms of making this recommendation at the, certainly at the Board of Aldermen, but I don't have that information here tonight.
Mr. Mead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know how much money is in the open space fund now?
Right now, the open space fund, which is being referenced under tonight's agenda item, is $269,000, I believe, $600. So basically, this is using the bulk of that money. This fund is the fund that's funded through the fees in lieu of account, so through development, so it involves no taxpayer money.
Further questions for Mr. Johnson? Seeing none, does anyone wish to make a motion? Actually, before I ask that, Mr. Sulkus, would at this point, we require 2 separate motions, first to acquire 701 North Street, and then a second for the transfer of the open space funds?
That would be correct.
And there would be no additional presentation or question. We've taken up both of those issues so far.
Yeah,
Is that fair to say?
you've done them simultaneously since they're related. So if you have any other questions, you should probably get them out now.
Hearing that, does anyone have any further questions before we vote on the 2 issues about whether or not to acquire 701 North Street and to approve or disapprove the transfer of $269,000 from the Open Space Fund to fund that purchase? Mr. Nichol?
One question, on that open space fund, wasn't that paying your salary up front?
Correct.
So what happens now if we spend it all?
Well, initially, you're correct. That fund was paying for my salary. Last July 1st, my position was voted to become part of the city budget, so I'm no longer being paid out of that fund.
Any further questions? Seeing none, Does anyone wish to make a motion relative to the City of Milford acquiring 701 North Street? Mr. Grant, is there a second? Mr. Mead? Is there any discussion? Does anyone wish to be heard on that motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of the City of Milford, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. Next, as far as item agenda D4, the transfer of $269,000 from Open Space Fund for the purpose of purchasing 701 North Street. Does someone wish to make a motion on that item? Mr. Panzella, is there a second? Mr. Nichol? Is there any, does anyone wish to be heard on that motion? Mr. Marlowe? Correct. It would be our endorsement of the moving it along, I suppose. Anything further before we vote? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor of the motion? Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And we'll move on to what now is number 5 under D, which would be the grant that we added to the agenda. Would you please let us know about that?
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. I'd like to bring forward a This grant that I'm speaking for tonight is a USDA grant through the Natural Resources Conservation Service that the city had applied for floodplain easement conservation after Storm Sandy. We had made an application on a number of undeveloped properties in Milford, and that the city owned and sponsored several privately owned properties. The item before you tonight is specific to the city-owned properties. These are all undeveloped properties in 2 marsh systems, one in the Calf Bend Meadow Creek and one over some properties over in the Silver Sands Marsh area. These have no buildings on them, no structures. The city received tentative notification in October of 2014 that these properties were selected. They just completed an appraisal on these properties in March of 2016. These 42 properties represents 24.96 acres, and effectively the value to the city for NRCS purchasing a conservation easement and putting that on the properties would be approximately $1,100 per acre. So the value of the easement for those 24 acres is, I believe, it's on the final page of the summary. I think it's like $25,467, something to that effect. So that would be the value the city would receive for placing that permanent easement on the parcels. In turn, NRCS would also be doing some restoration of those properties in the marsh to help maintain those in a healthy vegetative state. The benefit to the city beyond the monetary value is also that by placing these in permanent conservation easement, this also benefits the community rating system, which helps towards a discount on flood insurance property rates in the city of Milford. What I'm before you tonight is to get your recommendation to move this as a favorable acceptance to the Board of Aldermen, so this can be taken up at their next meeting. So I appreciate your taking this on as an extra agenda item tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there questions for Mr. Johnson relative to the presentation? Seeing none, does anyone wish to make a motion relative to the presentation? Mr. Mead.
I approve, make a motion to approve the grant money for the properties mentioned.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Grant. Does anyone wish to discuss or be heard on the motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of the motion? Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Mr.
very
Johnson.
much for your time.
Next on the agenda is new business. The first item of new business is 42 and 50 Cherry Street. It is the petition of John Wicko, architect, for site plan review approval to construct an office building on map 66, block 822, parcels 41 and 42, of which MetroStar Capital LLC is the owner.
Good evening, John Wicko, office at 50 Broad Street. I'm here for MetroStar Capital LLC. The owner member is Bob Smith, Jr., and his office is at 50 Cherry Street. He purchased a parcel next to his office, which is 42, with the intention of developing it as a professional office in the RO zone. Take this, I'll walk through the plans for you. We have an existing survey which shows the conditions as they are now. The 42 is a single-family residence that's in not such good shape. 50 is Mr. Smith's office with other tenant spaces, and it's a mixed-use building with residential dwelling units on the second and third floors. We're proposing to combine the lots, which means taking out that center line, which the site engineer and land surveyor, CCG, will prepare those maps once we need to move forward, if we're fortunate enough to do. The lots are in an X flood zone, so there's no flood area that we have to be concerned with. It's also outside of the wetlands review area, so we have nothing to consider with that issue also. The existing building is developed. It has landscape front, parking along a single curb cut, and a parking lot at the rear with a buffer towards the R12 zone that's behind it. 56, which is a professional office next to us. 42 is the house, and then 30, I should have my glasses on. 50, looks like 37 is also a professional office. So we're meeting and fitting in with the neighborhood of the residential office district, and the architecture also fits in, which I'll go over momentarily. Going through the site plan, the site area combined is 46,616 square feet. So I put these on so I can see what I'm talking about. There was some confusion during the department reviews. Just wanted to make clear that regarding the mixed use. The existing building, number 50, is the mixed use building. Combine the lots, we'll have a professional office building which has no residential units in it. So the whole site is still considered a mixed use development. Some of the fire department comments and building comments I clarified with that. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to you guys also. We conform to all of the regulations with the exception of parking, which is a notion of shared parking, which is allowed in the zone, but we do need to ask for that waiver, if you will, or the use of that shared parking consideration. I can go through the SP1, but basically everything conforms. We're close on lot coverage, which we maximize the lot for parking and to to reduce the amount of shared spaces required. But we are still under the, I think the lot coverage is allowed at 70%, and we're at 69.9. So we're right there, but it is conforming to the regulation. The lot number 50, which is the existing mixed-use building, is to remain with no improvements, with a few exceptions that we are modifying to accommodate the use of the entrance access off of the parking lot at 50 into 42. We're also proposing to do some improvements around the dumpster. But all the landscaping, the improvements at the parking lot, and the tenants and of it's a fully occupied building, are to remain as they are. The parking issue is that we have 8 residential dwelling units that require 16 spaces. The combined office uses require 53 spaces, which is 69 in total, where the site is providing 59. So we're asking to use the shared parking regulation for 10 spaces. Through Mr. Smith's experience with the residential market and the office market, having a lot of rental buildings, and through observations that I've made throughout the months prior to this, his building is maximized with full occupancy, and at various times during the day, there are still 20 as a minimum that are open, not occupied, with the residential and the office. So we are providing this other lot that will more likely serve 42 and access to that building. So we are providing 6 of the required 16, and there are certainly the 10 that we're using should not be an issue, especially since the daytime use of the office and the nighttime use of the residential. But even if all the residents were there, even the way the lot is now, there would be twice as much parking available to that shared arrangement. We have the landscaping plan, which shows, well, actually before that, just to finish up on 50, we are proposing a fully enclosed dumpster, which is detailed on further in the set. Right now, there is just a front gate, and we wanted to just enclose that to make it a little more desirable and screen that dumpster. Landscaping-wise, the front lawn of 42, we're proposing lawn area, which is similar to the 50 and most of the other properties on the Cherry Street side. So it's consistent. And then we're doing some pretty traditional planting types with boxwood, mounting junipers, and some flowering plants in between those foundation plantings, which are on the 2 sides of the building. This also acts as the 5-foot buffer between the parking area and the building. And in the rear, we have also some buffered areas, slightly smaller, but planted out in front of the stairs and in front of the handicap ramp. There's a list of all the plants and descriptions on the site drawing that if you had some questions I can go into, but it's all at that area. I also showed the building lighting portion of the lighting plan, which we have some sconces, recessed lights, and a wall pack for the handicap ramp access, and all their values are 0.5 that are relatively close to the building. They're not even near any of the property lines for light trespass, so that the building meets it. And I'll show a sight line. We only have 1 pole in the parking lot, And there is a sheet describing that for you. SP3 shows the site details. I wanted to give you an indication of what the sign looks like, which is a monument sign with architectural trims, but will be coming in for the sign permit just before construction on that, not at this time. But I wanted to show you the character of that matches the building. SP4 shows the existing dumpster and the new dumpster enclosure with details. We're proposing a solid cedar fence that'll encompass the existing dumpster that's in the same location. Engineering was performed by Ron Wasmer of CCG here in Milford. And we're starting with the grading plan, which shows the stormwater retention by use of a galley system that is proven by hydraulic calculations and a study that was performed by the engineer for a 25-year event at a 24-hour duration. There is a high-level overflow that would be required for this storm. Anything that's greater, which is piped underground to a storm catch basin at the city system. The engineer's drawings were reviewed by the city engineer and acceptable to him as meeting all the requirements. The building is served by sanitary sewer, water, electric, gas, and telephone data, so it fulfills all the requirements for that. The site by grading also, it's pretty flat, so we had no problem with meeting the handicap requirements, and we were able to introduce slight grades to direct stormwater into the catch basins, some that are existing and one that's new. The sediment and erosion control plan, a requirement which we mapped out. Silt fences around the entire site, taken down at the rear for construction, but access were being provided off of the existing 50 parking lot with a detailed anti-tracking pad, so there won't be any construction or vehicles other than entering and exiting the site through the existing driveway. Utilities are delineated clearly on SU1, which has the water vaults and gas lines. The meters are located around the building. None on the front of the building, all to the rear and to the side. IL1 shows we have one pole lamp, a decorative cast metal light with the photometric values being identified and the values being 0 at the property line. One thing I did want to mention too, we have a proposed fence with landscaping at the parking, our proposed parking, and that's more drawings than I thought. SP2. So that provides our buffer. We have tree junipers that soften the fence, and it's a solid cedar fence that's around the parking lot on the north and west side of the property and stops at the building. I think that is it for site information. Right. Okay. And the building that we rendered with the two different views as if you're driving into the site from Cherry Street using the existing curb cut. Shows a two-story slab-on grade, but it's elevated, so it has a traditional feel to the building with intersecting gabled roofs, clapboard siding. So the character fits in with the residential office theme and the district that it's in. It's not an office building, but it's certainly not a house that's there. So, but it has the character of a more residential architecture. There's some nice details with the window heads having a transom and crown moldings, larger corner boards with the pilaster at the first level, some crown moldings, and decorative window, some flat panel moldings up in the gable for more of an informal style. So we feel that the building fits in well in the site, the size of it, its location on the site. It matches all the fronts of the other buildings and the character. And I can flip through quickly. The architectural drawings, like I said before, it's a slab on grade, so there's no basement or crawl space, pretty typical for a commercial building. The first floor has our ingress and egress stairs, front and rear porches, so we still have a presence to the road. It's not like the building is turned around where you're looking at the back of the building. I presented it as two fronts, as the rendering shows. This is probably going to be used more as an egress in reality than an entrance, but we do have a walk that goes to the sidewalk at Cherry Street. If someone's walking, there is entrance into the building there. First and second floor plans, the configuration is undetermined at this point, but it could be one user. The building being a little over 5,000 square feet, not a big building. So that could be someone's office, or it could be a first floor office with a second floor office, or even 4 smaller ones. So, but square footage wise, it's the same use, and so all the parking requirements and things are the same, just how it's separated might be different. The elevations, the front and side you see there. The rear is, I want to just show you that it's similar in character. So we're getting a good looking building all the way around, even towards the neighbor, with fenestration that's appropriate for the size of the facade. The rear entrance with the handicap ramp coming up, very subtle, not too obvious. It's the architecture and the gables that make the building. And then lastly, A5 shows, for informational reasons, the height, the floor to floor, the finished ceiling height, and more importantly, the height of the building is just over 30 feet to the midpoint of the roof, which is under the 35-foot regulated maximum height. That's the project in a nutshell. I can answer any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you. Mr. Sulkus, do you have comment on the application?
No, you have my report. Other than the shared parking issue, it complies with our regulations.
Thank you. Does the board have questions for Mr. Wicko? We have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Wicko.
Sounds good. If I could, not sure how your
Yes.
schedule is, but if a decision could be made tonight, that would be much appreciated.
Certainly so.
Thank you.
That said, does anyone wish to make a motion as to this application to approve the site plan? Mr. Grant, is there a second? Mr. Marlowe. Does anyone wish to be heard on the motion to approve the site plan? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to approve? Aye. All opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Next on our agenda Under new business is the site plan review for 83 Point Lookout. It's the petition of John Wicko, architect, for coastal area management site plan review approval to construct a single-family residence on map 28, block 583, parcel 6, of which Stephen and Elizabeth Fogler are the owners.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Raymond Pear, Vice President of Engineering at Westcott & Mapes, located at 142 Temple Street, excuse me, New Haven, Connecticut. I'm the civil site engineer for the project, here with architect John Wicko, who's the architect.
Excuse me,
for
can
the
you talk
project.
more into the mic, please?
Certainly. Again, Raymond Pear from Westcott & Mapes, here with John Wicko, the architect for the project. The property for the proposed project is 83 Point Lookout, parcel 6, block 583 of Assessor's Map 28, the Fogler's residence. The property is located in our R12-5 zone. The total parcel size is 19,216 square feet, or 0.44 acres. The existing conditions is represented on the zoning location survey prepared by Westcott & Mapes. I have the map in front of you. For orientation, you can see at the top of the plan, the north arrow pointing upward. To my right, your left, is Point Lookout, the roadway. Center of the sheet, the subject property, and at the far side, to the southwest, is Long Island Sound. The proposed building site, center of property, is approximately elevation 25. The well-defined FEMA flood zone is elevation 19 along the embankment, so you could see that the property is well above the FEMA flood line. And the Long Island Sound being here where my pointer is. So you've got a 20 to 25 foot drop from the subject property down to the water. The existing feature here that I'm pointing to is an existing timber stairway and deck area that has historically been there and was renovated by the previous owner. No intentions of touching or interrupting that particular feature. The property had a home on it in the past, and it was demolished some time ago by the previous owner. The current owners, the Foglers, are now seeking to construct their home on this now vacant parcel. We have prepared a presentation site plan, which is a compilation of all the site plans you have in your package. This coloring rendering to my right. Same orientation, north up. Point Lookout roadway here to my immediate right, the northeast, and then Long Island Sound to the far southwest. The beige orange colored structure in the middle of the property is obviously the proposed residence, the proposed home. Also pointed out some of the other features: two-car garage, driveway in this location, front entrance walk, porch, rear patio, and pool area. The configuration in the plan, setbacks, the coverage, all meet the zoning requirements for the zone in total compliance, as is the compliance with the CAM policies. We received all of the comments, feedback from the reviewing agencies, including from engineering. The comments were minor and technical in nature. And as represented in the reviewing memo, stated that it should not preclude approval. All the minor technical nature comments could be easily addressed, and anticipated to have a sit-down meeting with the city engineer for the minor review amendment. Again, based on the memo, not precluding approval, I'd kindly represent and request of you to view favorably upon the application and with a positive assessment, and respectfully request conditional approval this evening if possible. At this point, barring any site questions, I'd like to just hand the presentation over to architect John Wicko for his overview of the house, the architectural features, and any related amenities on the site. Thank you.
Good evening, John Wicko, architect for the Foglers and office at 50 Broad Street. The Foglers asked me to design a nice house that they're going to live in and enjoy. The program ended up being around 4,000 square feet. It consists of a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and 1 seasonal bathroom at the pool area. We're proposing a full basement with a 2-car garage, all having elevations. The 2-car garage at 25.2. So, as Ray said, we're well above the adjacent flood zone. So we're outside of that and higher. So really, no consideration to that flood zone is needed because the house is not in it. I can kind of go through the plans quickly, but in terms of what the house is conforming to, meets all the coverages and building areas, as Ray stated. It's a nice house, open living area, 2-car garage, full basement, nice porch for the morning sunrise, and all those kind of good things that they're looking for. Second floor has 3 bedrooms and a playroom with a little stair that goes up to a 3rd floor office for Mr. Fogler to get away and have a great view while he's up there. Elevationally, traditional shingles style, cedar impressions with asphalt roof and copper accents. Building height is at the maximum, which would be the monitor over here, the office on the 3rd floor. That's at 32 feet to the midpoint, but more conventionally, the main gable roof line, which is the majority of the house, is 28 feet, which is as normal as they get. We're proposing, windows that meet DP ratings and withstand all the potential hurricane force winds, all the connections on the siding, and the construction will be scrutinized by the building department, but it'll meet all those requirements that will be before us. I also show at the last, I'd like to do the section to kind of show you what is going on inside with the basement, the 1st and 2nd floor, and the attics, and the kind of volumes that you get if you cut through it, just so you understand it. So the house is conforming and meets the requirements, and we're considering all the high wind and velocities that this house will hopefully not encounter, but we are designing it so it will withstand those forces if it has to. Thank you, and any questions that you might have of us?
Thank you. Mr. Sulkus, do you have any comments for us at this time?
No, the plan was reviewed by Mr. Harris, and so you have that in front of you. And also at Mr. Pear's request, if you do vote on this tonight, it should be a conditional approval because there are some issues that do have to be worked out with the engineering department.
Are there any questions for our presenters on this item? Seeing, Mr. Nichol.
You have an elevator in there.
Yes, I do. Elevator.
You have a generator? Where's the generator located?
We do not have a generator. It's not a requirement for accessibility per the state, so my understanding is that we don't need a generator.
You have battery backup. You have a UPS.
Battery, I'm sorry?
Uninterruptible power supply for the house.
Actually, I can get back to Mr. Sulkus with that answer, because I'm recalling now that Steve might be considering a generator. Do you know of any location that he might have talked to you about for a generator?
Not at this time, but with the site coverage and the area available, I'm sure we could find an area that would be accommodating. Nothing has been discussed at this time.
Yeah, we haven't talked about generator for the elevator purpose, but he has talked about a generator for the house. So how can we accommodate, and what was the background that you're
What
coming from?
operates the elevator if the power goes out?
Well, it's an elevator for convenience. It's not a requirement. So I'm not aware of any power requirements that are necessary for the operation of it.
So if you're stuck between floors, you just stay there?
Oh, no, yeah, no, there's, within elevators, there's mechanisms to release and lower the elevator within the cab itself or from outside on the residential elevators. Without power assisted, you manually operate the gearing. It's a geared elevator.
Are there further questions for the presenters? Seeing none, does anyone wish to make a motion for conditional approval pending working with the engineering department? Does anyone wish to make that motion? Mr. Grant, is there a second? Mr. Panzella, does anyone wish to be heard on the motion to grant conditional approval? Seeing none, we'll be ready to vote. All in favor of the motion? Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The next item on our agenda is 318-320 New Haven Avenue. It's the petition of Max Case Esquire for site plan review approval to establish a medical marijuana dispensary facility on map 56, block 545, parcel 8, of which the Pearl Corporation is the owner. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Attorney Max Case. I represent Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing, LLC, the applicant here tonight for site plan review approval. Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing proposes to conduct a medical marijuana dispensary at Unit B, 318 New Haven Avenue. And that property is located in a CDD4 zone where a medical marijuana dispensary is a permitted use. Now, I understand that this is not a public hearing, but I know that some of you may have some questions. So I have with me tonight Mr. Raj Patel, who's a member of Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing, Mr. Richard Couch, who's a licensed professional engineer, who will discuss the site plan in place of Ray Oliver, who's away on vacation, Mr. Bruce Spiewak, a licensed architect and building code official, who will discuss the State of Connecticut Building Code application, Mr. Matt Gifford, who will discuss security measures. Also present this evening is Ms. Nancy Fellini, who is the president of the Pearl Corporation, the owner of the premises that encompasses 318-320 New Haven Avenue. And she will be available to answer any questions that you might have. I have some additional information, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to distribute to the board with your permission. So to summarize very briefly what I've given you all, first, a copy of Section 82H of the Connecticut General Statutes. We are aware of pending zoning regulation changes, but we submit that Section 8-28 governs this application. The next item that we've given you is a copy of a certificate of zoning compliance from Stephen Harris, dated August 21st, 2005. That was sent to Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing, LLC. Item 3 is a certificate of zoning compliance that was issued by the former zoning enforcement officer, Ms. Linda Stock. And that also shows on page 2 tenants that were in the building at that time. Item 4 shows the tenants that are presently in the building, with the exception of space B, which was Foot and Ankle Physical Therapy, LLC, which will be replaced by Southern Connecticut. Item 5 is a copy of your current zoning regulations with respect to medical marijuana dispensaries and production facilities. Item 6 is a letter from the Commissioner of the Department of Consumer Protection with reference to the application that was submitted by the Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing to operate a medical marijuana dispensary. And he recites some of the qualifications of my client. Item 7 is the license that's been issued by the State of Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection to Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing to conduct a medical marijuana and dispensary facility. Item 8 is a letter from the property owner authorizing us to appear on their behalf, although they are here. And item 9 is a map showing the location of the property and showing that it is more than 300 feet from the closest school or parochial school, which in this instance happens to be St. Mary's School. Now, we understand that the current regulations require a site plan. Unit B was formerly occupied by Foot and Ankle Physical Therapy, and that entity provided professional services until June of 2015. Now, the regulations that are promulgated by the Department of Consumer Protection classifies medical marijuana dispensary as a retail use. Now, gentlemen, I submit to you that the application that you have before you tonight for site plan review approval is very similar to the one that was before you 2 weeks ago on April 5th, 2016. There's an existing site plan approval for this property. And that approval was issued on October 8th, 1986. And a copy of a letter from Wade Pierce, who was the executive secretary for the Planning and Zoning Board, was attached to the application submitted by Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing, LLC. The only difference from the application that was submitted to you 2 weeks ago is this. Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing will occupy Unit B, which consists of 2,500 square feet in the building at 318 New Haven Avenue, but it will be one of 9 tenants who occupy the 2 buildings presently on the site. Unlike the other applicant, it will not occupy the entire building. Similar to the application that you heard on April 5th, 2016, there are no changes to the exterior of the building at 318 New Haven Avenue. This is strictly a tenant fit-out for Unit B. Now, as per your regulations, 5.19.2, there's no school or parochial school located within 300 feet of this proposed facility, and I submit to you that we meet the requirements of that regulation. So now I'd like to introduce Mr. Raj Patel, who is a member of Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing, and he will talk to you about his company and the services that they intend to provide.
Good evening. My name is Raj Patel, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I would like to start by telling you that Southern Connecticut Wellness and Healing is made up of 4 Connecticut licensed pharmacists who each have over 20 years of retail, hospital, and/or clinical pharmacy experience. Our focus in our work has always been to provide patients the medications they needed to treat medical conditions to allow them to have better quality of life. As pharmacists, we have seen that positive and negative effects of prescription medications. A successful medication is the one that provides positive benefit with least negative effect. We believe that medical marijuana that is formulated specifically for medicinal use can have therapeutic benefit for patients with approved debilitating medical conditions. We know that medical marijuana will not be a physician's first line of therapy, and that it will be used as an alternative after other treatment options are found to be ineffective. The most heartbreaking experience we've had as pharmacists is seeing firsthand the impact on these patients when traditional medications decrease in effectiveness, resulting in higher doses. With these higher doses, more of the negative impacts of medications are seen and cause a significant decline in quality of life. Medical marijuana can be a better alternative than very high doses of these medications. I also wanted to share a story of a friend that we recently met. Her father suffered from and lost his battle against cancer a few years ago. She told us that she wished Connecticut medical marijuana program had been an option then to provide palliative care and ease his suffering. These are the reasons why we want to operate a dispensary. It offers patients hope for better quality of life. We know that the use of medical marijuana, just like all other controlled substances, must be overseen by qualified professionals, like doctors and pharmacists. We will use our pharmaceutical expertise to ensure that medical marijuana treatment is done effectively, legally, and use clinical approach to improve outcome. A long-term improved outcome for us also means reaching a point when a patient can manage his or her condition over time with as little medication as possible. To that end, our patient care will also include recommending other tools such as physical and massage therapy, acupuncture, meditation, and yoga to provide relief. We know that you've heard about this program previously, but wanted to emphasize that Connecticut's medical marijuana program is very controlled and requires a physician with a bona fide relationship to certify, diagnose, and determine there can be benefit from the use of medical marijuana. Then the patient must register with the state and choose a dispensary. The final step in the process requires pharmacist consultation occur before medical marijuana is dispensed. We will consult with patients and their physician on an ongoing basis to manage treatment and assess the risk of negative impacts such as drug interaction. The dispensary will be staffed by the owners, who are pharmacists and licensed pharmacy technicians. Connecticut registered patients and only those registered with our facility will be seen by appointments only. We want to have an open door policy with city officials to discuss and work to address concerns that may arise. Finally, we wanted to conclude with some background on the application process. Department of Consumer Protection's request for application process for medical marijuana dispensaries was competitive and rigorous. We did not take the operation of a dispensary lightly. We spent 4 months to prepare an application that was comprehensive and thorough and described all aspects of the operation so that it would be effective, secure, and compliant with all relevant state and local regulations. Here is the application that was submitted to DCP on our behalf. We recognize that the proposed dispensary's location was the most important factor, and our objective was to find a site that met local and state requirements. We selected New Haven Avenue site specifically because it complied with Milford zoning regulations for a dispensary. We believe then and now in transparency and engaging in open dialogue. So when we prepared our application, we met with staff of Milford Prevention Council and Bridges to make them aware of the proposed dispensary location and express our interest in working with them. We are more than willing to offer our pharmaceutical and clinical knowledge and experience to work with community groups to help reduce substance abuse and addiction. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Richard Couch. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut with offices at 1084 Cromwell Avenue in Rocky Hill. I'm pinch hitting, if you like, for Ray Oliver, who is not available tonight. And I'm going to be showing you the plan, the site plan that's been prepared. And there's very little really to emphasize on here. There's no external change to the site plan. The work that's being proposed is interior fit-up to the unit within the building. There is a change on the parking to conform with your regulations for the parking for accommodating handicap spacing. And that's going to be accommodating 2 spaces at the main entrance and 2 spaces on the far side on here. At the moment, there are 2 spaces in this location and 2 spaces here, but currently that they are undersized by current requirements. They are being widened to accommodate current ADA and city requirements. The overall parking count remains the same on the entire site. There's no loss of parking. The difference on the site plan, this building that's here, building 3, was never constructed, and there is additional parking capability in the rear of the property. The buildings that are in service have a space requirement of 50, and there are 71 spaces available. 71 spaces would be required if there was a total constructed build-out. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Bruce Spiewak. I have offices in West Haven, Connecticut at 375 Morgan Lane, and my practice is limited to code consulting, and a lot of our clients are other architects. So we're not here replacing Mr. Oliver. We're here as a resource to the team to provide information on the application of the Connecticut State Building Code and how it would apply to the renovations and alteration work in this building, and also to answer any questions that might occur to you on those same topics. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll be here sitting through the rest of the hearing if something occurs to you that didn't occur to you on the spur of the moment. Thank you.
Do you have anyone for,
Good evening. My name is Matt Gifford, representing Custom Vault Corporation, headquartered in Bethel, Connecticut. We were contacted by Southwestern Connecticut Wellness and Healing in August and September of last year to consult and assist them with their security needs to meet the DCP Section 21A 408-52, 51, and 62, specifically for dispensary facilities. Based on our knowledge, working with past grow facilities and dispensaries, not only in the state, but all over 13 other states across the nation, our expertise was able to come with them to design a secure facility to meet all of the Connecticut state statutes and their specific requests. If there's any questions on the security of the location, feel free to ask any questions that you guys might have. Thanks for your attention.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, to sum up, it's our position that this application meets all the requirements of Section 5.19.2. It's more than 300 feet from the nearest school or parochial school. There is an existing site plan approval that's of record. The property is in a zone district where a medical marijuana dispensary is a permitted use. So we would request your approval of this application. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Attorney Case. Mr. Sulkus, any comment for the board?
I do not.
Does the board have any questions for Attorney Case or any of the other presenters or members of the applicant's team? Mr. Nichol.
Yeah, I guess is the Max. Does he intend to install all of these alarm devices, panic alarms, alarms that notify if somebody's trying to get into the building from either the construction site or the roof, the back doors, the secure door in the back by the construction facility? Is that motion detected, or is there an alarm back there?
Not only will there to be standard door contacts, there will be glass breaks and motion detectors covering all aspects of entry and exit, whether it be windows or doors.
I'm concerned about inside the building.
Basically, there will be motion detectors throughout the interior so that under no aspect from a roof access or anywhere else will someone be able to be within the facility without the system being operated and armed.
Inside the building, for the protection of your workers, are there panic alarms?
Yes, there's also hardwired as well as wireless, panic or duress, in addition to certain buttons that employees will have to open or close doors at request. Those panic devices will also be on their body as needed. So, for example, if someone is in the dispensary or in an upstairs office, they have the capacity to have a silent duress.
One other question on that order. Is that hooked up to our police department in any way?
The way that it's hooked up to the police department is very similar to how Milford Bank or Bank of America, through a third-party monitoring system that's Underwriter Laboratories tested and approved, so that the flow chart that Southwestern Connecticut Wellness will have will be able to dictate exactly who is contacted and for what issue with a zoned or an unzoned alarm response.
I have a question on the parking.
Yes, Mr. Nichol has a question as to the parking, if someone can
Okay.
address that. Why don't you, yeah.
You indicated there were many spaces to park in the back of the building. And when I made a site review, all I found back there was construction equipment.
Yes, at the moment, this area in here is obstructed by construction equipment, and the owner of the property has said that that area would be made available as appropriate or as necessary, or as required. That area has been used and this area hasn't been changed, and so this use isn't going to be changing the way that the site is used now. So it's not going to put an additional parking burden on the property.
Thank you.
Are there additional questions for the applicant? Seeing none, does anyone wish to make a motion for approval of the site plan application? Seeing none, I'll make the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Grant, does anyone wish to be heard on the motion to approve the site plan application? Seeing none, we'll open it to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve? Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much. The next item under the agenda of new business is 128, 132, and 140 Monroe Street, a subdivision bond return. It is the request by Howard Barish for the return of a subdivision bond in the amount of $30,474 as approved by Chris Saley, Director of Public Works, in his memo of April 12, 2016. Mr. Sulkus, is someone presenting that, or is that just part of our materials that we've received?
That should be part of the material you received. You should have received that request from Chris Saley.
Any additional comment from your office as to this item?
No, this is fairly typical when we have subdivisions, when a bond is taken out. If the work is done to the satisfaction of the city, and specifically Public Works, at some point the bond is released, and that's what we have here.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Sulkus as to this item before we open it up for a motion? Mr. Marlowe.
Just more a curiosity question. How long does the city wait before they release a bond? I know when you're in the street, they wait a certain amount of time for any settlement to happen to go back and fix it.
That's called the performance bond, so that's generally a year.
Mr. Mead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These three properties, only one home has been built. Do you think they'll still have to open up the roads for the sewers? And
if they have to make connections, as anywhere in the city, the road will be opened. It will then be repaired to city specifications.
the Public Works Department thinks it's okay now unless they have to do something later?
All I can say is they have no problem returning the bond now.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from Mr. Sulkus? Seeing none, does anyone wish to make a motion to approve the subdivision bond return? Mr. Panzella, is there a second? Mr. Mead, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. Next on the agenda is item number 8, Way Street, approval for city services. A request by Greg Field for planning and zoning approval to accept a portion of Way Street to public services as approved by Chris Saley, Director of Public Works, in his memo of April 8th, 2016. Mr. Sulkus, is there anyone who will present that besides what we have in our materials?
What you have in your materials is what you have.
Any comment in addition to said materials?
Yeah, this is a step in the full acceptance of a street. When a new street is being built, it reaches a point where the Director of Public Works will recommend that it's okay to accept city services, but the street still may have issues that need to be addressed in terms of construction. And using the last application as an example, there's a bond in place to make sure that that will happen.
Any questions from Mr. Sulkus on this item? Seeing none, does anyone wish to make a motion for approval of city services? Mr. Grant, is there a second? Mr. Panzella, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. That concludes our new business. Moving on to old business is the public hearing that had been tabled from April 5th, 2016, and it's been extended to close by July 14, 2016, and it expires on that date. It is proposed zoning regulation text changes petition of the City of Milford and Milford Prevention Council, Inc., for a change in the zoning regulations to Articles 3 and 5, Sections 3.10, 3.11, 3.16, 3.17, 3.18, 3.20, and 5.19. Mr. Sulkus, at this point, we have no one else who's going to present, I believe, in favor, but I do believe that the subcommittee, Regulations Subcommittee, did meet and address this, the regulations. Would it be appropriate to address that now or to wait until the report of the Regulations Subcommittee?
You should probably wait till the Regulations Subcommittee.
Okay.
Item H.
Seeing none, we'll pass on this public hearing that remains open. And we'll move on to the next item agenda, which are the liaison reports. Do any members have a liaison report this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Regulation Subcommittee. Mr. Grant.
The Regulation Subcommittee had a special meeting to review the documentation that was submitted for the change of the regulation. There was a lot of open questions, a lot of language that needs to be addressed. It was the recommendations of the subcommittee that at this particular point in time is to basically not approve or disapprove the regulation changes that were submitted, but to turn it over to the city's, to our staff to review it also and to come up with some language that basically would allow or not allow any additional facilities to come into the city.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. The next item is the approval of minutes. I believe we have the April 5th, 2016 minutes. Does anyone wish to make a motion to approve those minutes? Mr. Panzella, is there a second? Mr. Grant, all those in favor? Aye. We also received the March 15, 2016 minutes. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Mr. Grant, I'll second the motion. All in favor? Aye. The motion passes. They are approved. Next on the agenda is the chair's report. I do not have a chair's report this evening. Last on the agenda is the staff report. Mr. Sulkus, do you have a report?
Nothing this evening.
At this time, the chair will entertain motions to adjourn. Mr. Grant, is there a second? All in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you.